Well, it's late, well past my bedtime anyways, and I'm staying up late because tomorrow, first thing in the morning, I'm going to be at a nearby automatic transmission shop, or just a transmission shop. I'm sure they do manuals, transfer cases, differentials, you know, the whole shebang. At any rate, I'm going to be over there building a couple transmissions for them to help out. They've got like a bunch of units ready to go and they're understaffed and they could use help. So I'm going to be over there tomorrow, and I'm staying up late because I am trying to get prepared for tomorrow. The shop's like fully outfitted with tools, but I don't really know like the lay of the land over there, where all the tools are going to be. So in an attempt to be more efficient, I've been working on rounding up all the tools for the transmissions that I'm going to be working on, if I could speak. Like I said, it's late. I'm tired. Hang on. The transmission I'm going to be working on is a 4L60E. There's going to be two of them over there for me. And so I'm rounding up tools for that transmission. Got basic sockets, some Torx bits for shifter cable, bell housing, a couple impact guns, an assortment of snap ring pliers, some punches for like check ball capsules and what have you. A number of screwdrivers. The ones on the left are like little pry bars. Going to be using those for snap rings to remove them from clutch drums and what have you. These two here, I've got notches cut in the end, and I use those for installing the snap ring that retains the low reverse piston. Got a couple other miscellaneous screwdrivers, some picks for removing seals, and sometimes using them to install the seals. What build would be complete without a hammer? Got some locking pliers. This square stock, I use those in conjunction with those locking pliers and a hammer. I use those to remove bushings from, you know, the various parts of the transmission. And then for the install, we're using bushing drivers. Now, I've gone through all of the bushings on this unit I've got here on the bench and pulled all of the bushing drivers, the exact ones I need to get the job done tomorrow. I, of course, over here have a much larger set up on the wall, but I'm not going to bring everything. I just wanted to bring just the bare necessities. So yeah, and then down here on the ground, I've got these guys here. The one on the right, I used to set the pump on, so I can set it upside down and work on it without having the pump roll around and chasing it around on the bench. Same deal for the tall one, but that one's used, I can use it for the pump, but that one I use for the input drum here. It's got that long shaft, and if you've got a bench that's got a large hole in it, yeah, you can flip the shaft over, but if not, you can use a tall stand, and those are just like homemade. I mean, you can see the welds on there aren't real pretty, but it's holding up, so yeah. Moving on, I've got an assortment of pocket screwdrivers. The white ones are identical. They've got really strong magnets on them, great for the check balls and dropping bolts and retrieving those bolts. The one in the center's got a really dull tip on it, and I'll sometimes use that for installing seals that I just want to be careful with. I don't want to cut. Of course, got a 3/8 drive ratchet. Got a couple torque wrenches, foot-pounds, inch-pounds. This, what looks like a washer, I use that for installing or compressing this spring cage here. Spring cage lives inside of our input drum, and when you compress that spring cage, you're doing so you can install the snap ring and get the snap ring into its groove. But when compressing that in the arbor press, if you don't know what an arbor press is, that is this guy right here. The arbor press can easily generate enough force to deform or mess up that spring cage. So by taking this washer, you can put it on top of there, and that gives you a little protection. Add some rigidity, that's the right word, some stiffness to the top of that spring retainer to keep it from getting jacked up. Got some lip seal installers here for the various lip seals. We've got our shifter shaft seal remover and installer. Got a couple ratcheting wrenches that I use in conjunction with that. And then one of the ratcheting wrenches fits these bolts here on the pump puller. Hopefully I won't need that, but it happens. Get everything installed, realize that something's not right, and then have to tear back into the unit by pulling the pump out. I've got our low reverse spring compressor. This low reverse piston is retained by this spring retainer, and of course there's a snap ring. You can see this thing's been a little deformed. This is what happens. These spring cages don't tolerate a whole lot of abuse, and this one, unfortunately, looks like I got carried away. But anywho, this is a homemade tool here, low reverse spring compressor tool that I welded together, fabricated, whatever you want to say. Like I said, I'm tired. Got that put together, I don't know how many years ago. Moving on, we've got some feeler blades and a dial caliper. Feeler blades are for measuring clutch pack clearance. I use the dial caliper to set clutch pack clearances, or at least measure steels, and I've got a whole stack of steels here, and these are what are called selective. So there's different thicknesses. You've got thin ones, like medium-sized ones, thick ones. So if the clutch pack is too tight or too loose, I mean, you can start swapping out steels to adjust the thickness. And last but not least, got some miscellaneous stuff down here. Teflon sealing ring installers and sizers for stator shaft, input shaft. A mallet I happen to like. Some assembly lube. This is a thicker blend or whatever, real super tacky. And I'll use that for the 2-4 servo to hold the sealing rings in, because I've had them where they've popped out of place during assembly. I cut a ring, and then the transmission, upon just trying to road test the vehicle, instantly it's missing second gear, and it's because the sealing ring got cut. So that's just a way to get around that. This clamp that's like a mile long, I actually use that for installing the servo. Like, I'll install it most of the way by hand, but to hold it in place, it serves as an extra hand for me. It holds the servo fully inserted into the bore, and then that gives me time to get the snap ring pushed into place. Got our pump band. It's an alignment band to align the two halves before they get torqued together. Some miscellaneous files that come in handy, sometimes using a screwdriver like on the valve body or whatever to pop out like a retaining clip. I can end up damaging some of the metal or raising a little bit of the metal. It's an easy fix. Use a file, clean it up, and it helps to prevent other problems and whatnot. Got some work gloves, some nitrile gloves, a couple t-shirts that I like for shop rags or whatever. Piece of wood I use when installing. This actually is used to install the pump slide spring. Kind of odd. And then I'm going to probably bring these couple pieces of wood that I like to use in the vise for throwing the pump in there or whatever in there. I don't want getting damaged. Now, of course, the shop might have some soft jaws that would be even better than the wood that I've got there. And then over here, I've got a couple boxes and a overhaul kit, just with some extra seals. Like this one on top here is a good example. This one is the reverse input drum. It's real easy to cut this larger outer lip seal when installing it. So I just want to have a backup in case I mess that up, that if they for some reason don't have a backup seal handy at the shop, then I'm dead in the water. And like I said, I want to go over there prepared and make the most of my time there. Well, guys, that's the latest. If time permits, while I'm over there tomorrow, I'll see about grabbing some video footage, and I'll share it. All right, so here I am, first morning over at the shop. I've got a bench full of transmission parts, but to back up a little bit, that wall behind the bench, on the other side of that wall is 2 bays with each with their own twin post lift, and there's, I don't know, 3 benches, 2 benches. It's really long bench anyways along one of the walls out there. And that's the teardown area. And what happens at this particular shop is they've got people dedicated to doing the R&R. If you don't know what that means, R&R stands for remove and replace, and they're talking about the transmission in this case. There's people that, you know, remove the transmission from the vehicle. That trans is then wheeled over to a bench where it gets taken off of that transmission jack and put onto the bench. And then at this particular shop, they have an individual that a lot of his day is tearing transmissions down and then getting those units cleaned up, and then all those units go into a shopping cart. So on the other side of the wall here, there's, I don't know, 3 or 4 shopping carts, at least this morning. The morning of this image, excuse me, and one of them has a 4L60E that I just wheeled the shopping cart into the build area and just unloaded the shopping cart, and just getting stuff thrown onto the bench to empty the shopping cart and get it out of the build area sooner rather than later, just to keep it from getting too congested in there. Initially, I started out with a pile of parts, and then here I've got them a little better organized. I've started grabbing, I've opened up the overhaul kit, specifically the seal kit, and I'm pulling seals out. Normally I'd want to have like all the overhaul kit stuff on the bench, or have some of it hanging like on the pegboard up above the bench like this. But like I said, this is my first time in the shop helping out over here. I didn't have as much room as I would like, and I didn't have like a tool cart. I really like magnets on the wall, like you've seen back here over the solvent tank. I've got a magnet there, and on my tool cart itself, there's, well, at least 1 magnet strip hanging from the outside of it that I'll hang like snap ring pliers, ratchet, screwdrivers sometimes, just whatever. But it would have been really nice if I would have had room, like say to the left of the bench, you can see all the tools I've got covering that t-shirt. If I could have taken all those tools and thrown them in a tool cart that was living right next to the bench there. But reason I didn't do that is there's an arbor press just outside of the shot here, and it's just kind of crowded. It would have been too crowded for me to put a tool cart right there. Had I had it that way, all the tools that are sitting on that white t-shirt, those tools would have gone into the cart, and then my overhaul kit, everything would have got laid out onto those t-shirts. And then of course I would have laid out, you know, small transmission parts like bolts and what have you, small little sub-assemblies. I'll gather all those things, put them together, and they would have went onto the next t-shirt over, because I've got 2 t-shirts there laid out. But like I said, a little crowded, not ideal for me, but yeah, it is what it is, and just made the best of it. Unfortunately, this was the only footage I was able to get. I did get the green light from the shop owner to do some filming while I was in there. And my plan originally going into this was to set up a small little action camera. I'd love to take this camera that I'm filming with now. It's a lot higher quality than the action cameras are. But this camera, I need a tripod at a minimum, and the legs with them, to get the camera up high enough, the legs got to get fanned out really far, and then it's a tripping hazard. It just eats up precious real estate in the build room, and I decided that wasn't going to be a viable option. But I did want to bring like a little action camera in there and get it mounted somewhere over the bench, and it just didn't happen. You know, I was up late, as you saw, packing tools, trying to get ready, and kind of came down to, well, am I going to start rounding up camera gear or get to bed? And I decided to go to bed. So I showed up the first day without the action camera, so no time lapse is what I was hoping to get, no time lapse of any of this build, which is a bummer. But I did get a number of photos of kind of the progress. I didn't cover everything, but I did get quite a few photos with my cell phone, and we'll go through some of those. Here I've got the pump already assembled. I've got it on one of my little stands. It's just a front wheel drive GM transmission drum, and it's one that gets commonly replaced, and instead of throwing it out, it's getting repurposed as a pump stand. So the pump's sitting on the stand, and then of course I've got the reverse input drum living on top of the pump. I've got feeler blades out, and it looks like I'm probably checking clutch clearances here. This input reverse clutch is just kind of sloppy right from the factory, and to the best of my knowledge, there's no way to adjust it. Meaning I can't tighten it up, can't loosen it. There's nothing I can do with it. They don't offer selectives for it, to the best of my knowledge. So what I'm actually doing with the feeler blade here is I was just measuring the clearance between the bushing in the drum and the support or the journal that bushing rides on. It's called the rear pump support or whatever that this drum rides on. It seemed just, I don't know, a little loose or whatever, so I just wanted to check it and see how many thousandths of an inch feeler blade I could fit in there, and then compare it to something else, just to have something to check it against. At this point in the build, I've got all the planetary gear set stacked down inside the transmission. I've got the drums, the input drum, of course that reverse input drum as well, built, assembled, clearances checked. So you can see that I've got the 4L60E case stood upright for stacking purposes. The case is sitting on a couple 2x4s, and those 2x4s are being supported by a trash can. It's really like an oil drum or whatever, not a 55-gallon drum, but a much smaller one. I don't know the quantity of these. I've got one sitting right here. Doesn't matter, but these drums show up at the shop filled full of gear oil, typically, like for a rear diff or something, or just a manual transmission. And then once they run completely out, these cans are great for trash cans, and I happen to like them for a building stand. It happens to be like a good height for me to work at least with the 4L60E and some of the shorter transmissions. Something longer like an E4OD or one of those bigger transmissions that are longer. This might be a little too tall for my liking, but for the 4L60E and for my preferences, it's perfect. So yeah, I actually stole the owner, who also is the builder on the bench to the right. I stole his trash can to build this unit, stood it up. He got kind of a kick out of that I was building on a trash can. On the far right of the bench behind the blowgun, they've got like a mount, and there is a way to mount this transmission and a number of the GM transmissions directly to the bench. Basically, with the unit on that fixture, it kind of limits my options as far as how I can position the trans. So I really like doing it here on the trash can. So here I've got the pump bolts. I think there's like 7 of them, if I remember right. Got my pump O-rings on there, the new ones out of the kit. And the blue stuff you see on there is medium strength thread locker. So once the trans is fully built and it's installed in the vehicle, there's no way to gain access to these bolts. I torque them down, of course, during assembly, but just as cheap insurance, I like to put some thread locker on there just to make sure they don't vibrate out or something. And that's just how I was trained when I was learning how to build these. And I've been doing it ever since. Here's a shot of the pump. It's been installed already. Got a few bolts in there, and yeah, getting ready for the rest of the pump to case bolts. Here's an easy one to forget. This is the input shaft O-ring. This one's a what they call a 300 millimeter input shaft. And on this particular style, you can't assemble the transmission with the O-ring on there. You have to wait till you've gotten to this point where the pump's in and it's the final assembly. You have to wait till that point in time before you can install this O-ring, or else it physically gets in the way when you're trying to install the input shaft through that part of the pump. On older style input shafts, it uses a much smaller O-ring. The design of the shaft is slightly different. I've actually got one right here. Let me grab it. The O-ring, instead of going on a big journal like this right here, the O-ring actually goes on this end of the shaft down here, and the O-ring is physically a lot smaller, and this part can go through the pump and the O-ring doesn't affect assembly. It doesn't get in the way, basically. So at this point in the build, I've got all of the guts stacked into the transmission. As you can see, I've got a long output shaft sticking out the rear of the transmission, which makes this 4L60E a two-wheel drive unit instead of a four-wheel drive unit. Like I said, I've got all the guts stacked in there. The pump's been installed. The pump bolts have been torqued down. I've got my servo installed completely. So that means that my band clearance, I've got it dialed in the way I want it. The front unit end plate, it's been adjusted. Everything there is I'm good with at this point in time. So now with the trans on the bench, I can get rid of the trash can, make some more room over there. And now I'm gonna be on to working on the valve body. Unfortunately, I didn't get a whole lot of pictures of this either. I do have this one valve train here. This is actually two valve trains separated by a plug in the middle. The valve train on the right, that valve and singular spring is the what's called the reverse abuse valve. The reverse abuse valve. So this valve is there to protect the transmission from the driver abusing it. In this instance, it would be the driver shifting from, let's say, park into reverse, but in doing so, they've got their foot buried into the throttle. The engine RPMs are elevated. If it wasn't for this abuse valve, the two clutch packs that are used, that are activated, those two clutch packs that create reverse, one of those clutch packs or both of them are going to get damaged. They're going to get, there's going to be a lot of slippage before there's enough oil pressure to fully engage those clutch packs. The job of this abuse valve is to reroute oil in a different way, and basically those clutch packs, they get activated a lot faster. The drawback to this is the bump from shifting from park into reverse. There's normally, a little bump. That bump is going to be, it's going to be a lot worse. It's going to be harsh. So, but it's better than smoking the clutches. So that's the job of the reverse abuse valve. It protects the transmission from self-destruction in the event that the transmission's being abused when it's being shifted into reverse. So once again, the valve train on the right is the reverse abuse valve. The valve train on the left, I believe, is the 3-2 downshift valve train. And then those two valve trains are separated by this plug in the middle, and there's a roll pin that holds that in place inside the bore. At any rate, there's a lot more to do inside the valve body, but this, for whatever reason, I got a picture of this and did not get a picture of anything else. So here we are coming down the home stretch. I've got the trans repositioned on the bench. I like to throw a 2x4 towards the rear of the trans, because otherwise the trans is leaning like pretty hard, and I just want to try to level the trans as much as I can. So when I'm putting the valve body on there, it just makes it easier. Just a preference, that's all. But at any rate, I've got the valve body installed. I've got all my bolts installed, wiring harness ready to be installed. And here I've got the wiring harness connected to each of its respective solenoids, sensor, and what have you. Here I've got the bell housing installed, but it was at this point in the build that I got pulled off of the bench to go do something else elsewhere in the shop. I don't remember, but at this point in the build, I had all the bolts installed all the way, and they were bottomed up against the bell housing, but I hadn't tightened those bolts. So in an attempt to not forget to tighten those bolts as soon as I came back to the bench, I took the tools I needed. I got an extension there and the Torx bit, and plus my safety glasses. I basically made it so I couldn't come back, grab the torque converter and install it, because I got stuff that's in the way, and it's relevant stuff. So this is a little tip there to hopefully not make a big mistake, because it would really suck to build this unit, install the bell housing and forget to tighten those bolts, and then they start backing out and they would go into a rotating converter, and it would just be a problem that couldn't be solved with the trans in the vehicle. It would require the transmission to be unbolted and removed out of the vehicle, pull the converter, gain access to those bolts, and it's just it's a mistake that you don't want to make if you can avoid it. It was at this point in the build that I thought for sure the individual that was in charge of tearing down and cleaning these units, I thought for sure he was messing with me. If you look closely on the bench here, there's a snap ring. That's never a good feeling to get done with a build and then see something like this on the bench and go, uh-oh, what did I forget to install? It can be a lifesaver. I'd rather catch it now with it on the bench than have it get installed into a vehicle, and then, especially if I'm not installing it, somebody else is doing it, it's their time, they install the unit, they've done nothing wrong, and then the unit doesn't work, and then it's only to find out that something got left out of the transmission, and now that individual has to pull the unit back out. It's just a waste of other people's time, and that's something I try to avoid at all costs if possible. But at any rate, after looking closer at the snap ring, I determined that it was not a 4L60E snap ring. Ran it past another guy, he agreed, and that snap ring is now living on the wall up on this, up on the pegboard. And I let a couple people know that, hey, if you guys are missing a snap ring on another transmission, you might want to check this wall, because here it is. At this point, the 4L60E has been slid off of the bench and onto a hydraulic cart. The torque converter has been fully installed. Speaking of which, previously Andy and I did a build series on the Turbo 400, and right after that series we were working on like a supplemental series that's there to support the main series. And in that secondary series, one of the videos was how to install the Turbo 400 torque converter. It's one of those things that there's so many ways to mess up a build. And in this case, it doesn't have anything to do with the rebuild of the transmission. But if you incorrectly install the torque converter, you can trash a brand new rebuild, and it'll be trashed before the vehicle even pulls out of the bay, which is a big bummer. So, point is, if you're interested in learning how to install a 4L60E torque converter, yes, the video is titled for a Turbo 400, but in that video, we do show some 4L60E parts, some relevant stuff to a torque converter install, and the steps for installing the Turbo 400 torque converter into that trans. It's the same steps for the 4L60E. So yeah, if you're interested in checking that video out, you should be able to find a shortcut in the video description down below. With the converter installed, I was supplied with this retaining bracket. This trans, actually, there was no vehicle at the shop for this transmission. It's what they call a bench build or a bench job, meaning that their customer brought this transmission to them. It was already pulled out of their vehicle. The problem with that is during transit, if we don't use a strap like this, the torque converter can make its way out of or away from the pump in the trans, and it can become disengaged from the transmission. And if the customer or whoever they hire to install the transmission doesn't catch that, once again, catastrophic failure for the transmission. I could have done everything to the best of my ability, only to have somebody else mess up with the converter, and it comes back to me as my fault. So anywho, this is just a way that we can prevent a problem with the torque converter. So their customers are supplied with this converter strap. And here is the completed 4L60E on a different cart in a different part of the shop, waiting to be picked up. After getting this unit done, I was back over to the shopping carts to grab another 4L60E. The other one was a couple years older, so there were some like design changes right around that time period, but not a big deal. After getting both of those units built, during my time there at that shop, I did tear down a rear-wheel drive Dodge or Chrysler unit. It's a 518. It was used in both gas and diesel Dodge trucks for a minute there, but stepped in to help out with that. And yeah, that was about the extent of my stay over at that shop. And that's going to wrap it up for story time. Hey, we've got more informational and educational videos heading your way soon. As always, thanks for your viewership. Really appreciate your support, and we'll see you in another video real soon.
I work hard each and every day. I get lost in the words I say. I don't push pause, no, I push play. I won't stop till I hear him say